Now we have Paul Evans from Daystrom. He's going to tell us about their company and what kind of products they're bringing to storage and facilitating the 4K workflow.
So I am Paul Evans. I am your today's storage wonk. James said that y'all have some issues trying to store all this data. And so I do come from a cinema background. I am a product of a cinema school. So I have been around town quite a bit. I fell in love with storage. That's why I am a wonk. And I can get into the weeds very easily. James has coached me not to go there. So we're going to try and move very quickly. Daystrom as a group is focused on M&E storage, data health, and data grids. Data grids do management of storage and how you're moving it through the workflow. And we basically align to any number of workflows. They're like snowflakes. So what are we going to talk about today? So I thought the choices to make around storage are related to protections, connections, accessing, and management. And those have to be four of the driest sounding topics I could have put on an agenda slide. So we're going to try and spice it up a little bit using ducks. And the fact that USC and Oregon are playing today is not lost on me. All right, but when you talk about storage, I like to split the conversation up because storage has many facets. There is how am I storing the data across the media, i.e. how am I protecting my data? And then the other conversation is how am I really talking to the data? So that's the access point. So what's the communications lingo like? And I'll give you an examples of SMB, CIFS, NFS, local clients for StoreNext. Things like that are how I talk to my storage and communicate so I can have access to data. And then protecting the stored data. What is the layout of the data so that if I have a media failure, I'm not out of luck? So I decided to try and explain this using FOUL. And so this is the single device model of a duck. This is where I have data to store. I give it to the duck stores it for me. If the duck were to die, I would have a problem. And also, if I need to go big, I have a problem with a single device because single devices only go so large. Now, there are some exceptions to that. So you can get extreme on the size of a single device, but then, of course, it's a single point of failure. So we don't want that to happen to us. And so there was a movement in the industry to how do we tolerate failure better? And we came up with, sorry, I forgot about this fun one. So there are some new evolutionary things like flash, and you can put flash into PCI buses, and those are very reliable. They're a little different, but they are high throughput, high scale devices. And I've seen the size of them now. They're really quite impressive. But moving back over to RAID, right? So the industry figured out we need to tolerate failure better, and they came up with the RAID model, redundant array of independent ducts. And in this model, I'm not giving my data to a particular media element. I'm giving it to a controller. So I hand the data to the larger duct, and the larger duct's responsibility is to distribute it across the smaller ones. In this model, if I lose one of the small children, I must replace it. Now I can regenerate the children, especially if I get another duct. But this model is dependent upon data protection where everybody is in a row, okay? And if I lose one, I gotta go get another one. Of course, I do need some more fault tolerance because now my single point of failure is the large duct, so this would be the redundant model. And that's where you go from a small desktop RAID system, which are really quite potent these days, to more of a rack-based system like a Quantum or Godhill, Xyratex. Any number of storage arrays can do this now. But then there is another model, which is a little bit more familiar, and that would be SAN or NAS. And that's where I take RAID systems or a multiplicity of aggregating systems, and I park them on a pipe, a network. And then I, as a client, can access any number of those devices. But again, we have a scale problem because RAID as a protection method and a scale method hits its walls at some points, and it gets to be a problematic thing because I've always got a single controller in that equation. So, enter object storage. Object storage is designed to deal with lots and lots of ducts. And rather than having a control mechanism where I'm distributing data from a finite perspective from a controller, all the ducts become really intelligent. They all talk to each other. And so when I push data into the duct field, they all distribute the data amongst themselves. Ducts can come, ducts can go. They all figure out how to distribute the data and protect it. Now, these different mechanisms of single device, which can go very fast and can get rather large, or RAID, which can scale even larger, or object storage, which has the ultimate in scale, they all have certain aspects to them and qualities about them that we need to discuss, one of which would be the storage connection. How do I plug into it? That's going to be a different discussion. We don't have time today. So let's talk about the other half. How would I talk to that storage, whether it be a block device, an object store, or anything else? Most of you are familiar with some network protocols, so I thought I would just isolate object storage today because that's the most strange beast out there for many people. We hear about it. It's the backing of cloud. I could have objects in the cloud. I could have objects in my data center. At a very basic level, the object protocol is very simple. I can put something, I can get something, and I can delete something. That's a very simple protocol for software designers to implement. Now, there are more advanced versions of it, and there are different flavors of it. But at the heart, it's about put, get, and delete. Now, there are some benefits. It's a simple protocol, which means it doesn't get screwed up very often. We like reliability. Clients like phones, laptops, tablets, they connect very well over this kind of a protocol. I can store my metadata right into that kind of an object store, and I have seamless scale. I can go as big as I want at the end of the day. But object store is machine friendly. People and other animals are very confused by trying to talk to object storage. Why? Because we all like file systems. And file systems is a standard model. So if I'm working with an object store, I either need to put software in front of it, like your nonlinear editor or some sort of asset manager, or I need to put a file system in front of it. So why would I want to put a file system in front of an object store? Some days there are reasons, but not a lot. So let's get into some of the numbers. I said that there are impacts to choosing between single device, RAID, or object. The first is I pay a management tax. So the bigger I want to go, the more management I need, and the bigger my tax is. So a single device, SSD, 500 megabytes per second. If my target is uncompressed 4K, then I can probably work with that quite well. If I've got, did I say compressed? Anyway, if my uncompressed 4K is not going to fit into that, right? I'm probably over a gigabyte per second for uncompressed high-resolution 4K images. So I'm going to need a different strategy. I'm going to have to gang them together either in RAID or in object storage. That's where these decisions start to hold out, right? As I go through various levels of RAID and I get all the way down to object storage on the right side, that device that could perform at 500 megabytes per second drops down to maybe 150. And hard drives look even worse. So while object storage is very cool, very expansive, very scalable, it's not a great performer unless you have lots and lots and lots of object storage, at which point you can gang together enough to make it go fast. And that's what does happen. Let's also talk about the per protocol side, because how you communicate with it impacts things as well. As you can see, USB 2, USB 3, those are not very exciting protocols on the left for what we do. Thunderbolt's good, 10 gig is good, Fiber Channel is still in there, great protocol. Not as popular now. Thunderbolt 2 and our personal favorites, 40 gig E. So if I have a target of 1.4 gigabytes per second, 1400 megabytes per second to deal with my 4K finishing, if I work with Thunderbolt 2 or 40 gig Ethernet over NFS, I got a lot of headroom. I can go fast. RDMA is a lot of fun, but we'll go into a different one. Conversation on that one. The last one I want to point out, NVMe, probably not something everybody's heard of. So that's flash sitting on a PCI bus. Looks like a hard drive to the operating systems. Goes about that fast. So this is a pretty viable model now. If you have a workstation, you put in a 5 or 6 terabyte NVMe drive, and you're doing 4K uncompressed, you have a lot of headroom. It's pretty reliable. That's why you need to figure out your workflow. So this is what we would call a grid approach. This virtualizes everything. Doesn't matter whether the data is in the cloud, whether it's on a local object store, or it's on really fast scale-out storage, and allows you access from any client anywhere in the world. There are a lot of caveats around that, right? If I'm in Australia trying to access data here in the US, I'll be going slower than if I'm in the US. But for those folks who need a global system that tags all files as they come through, tracks it, versions it, and maintains it within a storage solution, a grid is a great approach to take. Again, outside of today's conversation. So those 4 choices again, what were we talking about? Well, we want to stay on the target. What's our target? It always varies. Right? So how fast you need to go is a product of your workflow and how you're going to share your data. If I have a desktop and it's me, I don't have to share a lot, and I don't have to worry about how the performance is going to be impacted. But I need to figure out what my workflow is so I can know my management. I need to know what protocol I'm going to use for accessing it. I need to choose a connection, which would be Thunderbolt or Fiber Channel or Ethernet, something like that. And then, of course, I need to know how I'm protecting the data. If I'm doing lightweight work, I'm not scaling very large, I want to use the right tool, as opposed to if I have a lot of work to do in a large facility, I will select a different management paradigm for protection. And so at the end of the day, try to keep things as simple as possible, because it will save you a lot of money in the end. If things are going to get complex and complex workflows simply demand that, then get advice, because you want everything to go smooth and avoid the epic failures. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Paul. Excellent presentation. Everybody will agree.